Ramses II is remembered as the greatest pharaoh who ever lived, a god on earth, a military genius, the builder of monuments so massive that his name still dominates Egypt more than 3,000 years later. But there is a problem. One of the most famous battles of his life was not a victory at all. It was a near disaster. At Kadesh, Ramses walked straight into an ambush. His army was almost destroyed. He survived by luck, timing, and the arrival of reinforcements that saved him at the last possible moment. And yet, when Ramses returned home, he did something no ruler had ever done before. He turned a failure into an eternal triumph. He carved his version of the story into stone, on temple walls, on monuments, on statues stolen from older kings, so deep that no one could ever erase his name. This is not just the story of one pharaoh.
It is the story of how propaganda was perfected, how power learned to control memory, and how the most successful empire of the Bronze Age became so stable, so confident, and so rigid that it could no longer adapt when the world began to collapse. To understand how Egypt reached this point, we have to go back to the moment when it ruled the ancient world without rival, to the height of its power, to the golden age of empire, and to the man who mastered the art of being remembered. Imagine an empire so wealthy that it didn't just build temples, it built mountains of stone. By the time we reached the era known as the New Kingdom, Egypt had hit its absolute physical limit. If we look at the map, for most of its history, during the Old Kingdom, the Egyptians barely pushed beyond the first cataract of the Nile. In the Middle Kingdom, they struggled to hold the second. But the New Kingdom, this was a different beast entirely. The Egyptian military machine had pushed its borders all the way to the Sixth Cataract, deep into the territory of modern-day Sudan. The Egyptians themselves considered their southern border to be the sacred mountain of Jebel Barkal. By the standards of the Bronze Age, this wasn't just a country, it was a continental superpower.
But how did this massive machine actually work? Where did the resources come from to build colossi that still stand today? The answer lies in a unique economic system that is difficult for us to comprehend in the modern West. This was a natural economy. Money, as we know it, did not exist. When the state granaries were bursting with grain after a harvest, that wealth had to be spent. You couldn't just hoard wheat forever, it would rot. The best way to spend this surplus was to mobilize the population. We often picture the construction of Egyptian monuments as the work of miserable slaves cracking under the whip. But the reality was far more pragmatic and organized. The agricultural year in the Nile Valley dictated everything. When the Nile flooded, the fields disappeared underwater. For months, the farmers had absolutely nothing to do. They sat idle, waiting for the waters to recede. For the state, this was an opportunity. Hundreds of thousands of able-bodied men were available. So the bureaucrats would arrive, conduct inspections, and draft the population into state service. It was, in a sense, a social contract. The Egyptians believed that the pharaoh was responsible for maintaining Ma'at, the cosmic order. It was because of the pharaoh that the sun rose and the Nile flooded, granting life to the valley. In exchange for this cosmic security, the people gave their labor. This is how, season after season, the gigantic columned halls of Karnak and Luxor rose from the earth. Every new ruler felt a crushing obligation to add another courtyard, another pylon, another sanctuary, always bigger and more luxurious than the one built by his father. However, before we can witness this golden age in its full glory, we must understand the foundation it was built upon. This stability was born from the ashes of a great disaster. Egypt had just survived the reign of Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh, who had tried to break the spine of the most powerful organization in the country, the priesthood of Amun-Ra. He had moved the capital to the desert, banned the old gods, and centered the universe on himself. But his revolution failed. After Akhenaten's death and the short, tragic reign of his son Tutankhamun, the country lay in ruins. The old dynasty was dead. Who was left to pick up the pieces? Only the army. The 19th dynasty was not born in a palace. It was born in the barracks.
These were military men, generals who seized the throne to restore order. You can hear it even in their names. One of the first great rulers of this era was Seti I. Listen to that name, Seti. It literally means man of Seth. This is a crucial detail. In Egyptian mythology, Seth is not the devil. That concept didn't exist yet, though later Greeks and Christians would demonize him. In the Bronze Age, Seth was the god of war, the god of storms, the god of chaos. He was aggressive and dangerous, yes, but he was also the one who stood on the prow of the sun god's boat to spear the demons of darkness. For a dynasty of generals, Seth was the perfect patron. They respected strength.
Seti was obsessed with legitimacy. He needed to prove that he wasn't just a lucky general, but the rightful heir to the ancient kings. In his temple at Abydos, he created the famous Abydos King List. On the wall, we see a relief of Seti and his young son, the future Ramses II, offering incense to the spirits of their ancestors. But if you look closely at this list, you witness a masterclass in ancient cancel culture. Seti simply erased everyone he didn't like. There are no Hyksos rulers, the foreign invaders, on this list. There is no Hatshepsut, the great female pharaoh, because a woman on the throne didn't fit the narrative of male warrior kings. And most importantly, the entire heretic family is gone. Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, their names were chiseled out of history as if they had never existed. History was rewritten to show a direct, unbroken line from the gods to Seti.
But the most mysterious legacy of Seti I isn't on the walls, it is underground. Deep beneath his memorial temple, archaeologists found a strange structure known as the Osirion. It sits 8 meters below the level of the main temple. It is a megalithic structure built with gigantic granite blocks and no mortar. The style of this masonry looks nothing like the refined architecture of the New Kingdom. It looks like the raw, powerful engineering of the Old Kingdom, the age of the pyramids, thousands of years older than Seti. The mystery of the Osirion is still debated. Did Seti build it to intentionally look ancient, to simulate the tomb of Osiris? Or did he, while clearing the ground for his temple, stumble upon a ruin that was already ancient in his time and simply claim it by carving his name on it? We may never know for sure, but this place, where the Egyptians believed the head of the god Osiris was buried, became the center of a mystical revival for the country.
And now, the stage is set for the main character of our story, the son of Seti I, the man whose name became synonymous with Egypt itself, Ramses II. He is the only pharaoh in history who bears the title, the Great. He ascended the throne young, full of energy and ambition, and he would rule for a staggering 67 years. This is an entire era. Most of his subjects were born, lived their entire lives, and died knowing only one pharaoh.
We can see Ramses as a teenager on the walls of his father's temple, wearing the sidelock of youth, a hairstyle where the head is shaved except for one long braid, which was cut off only upon reaching adulthood. But once he became king, modesty vanished. Ramses II was a genius of propaganda. He plastered his face over every inch of Egypt. He didn't hesitate to hijack the monuments of his predecessors. His stonemasons would simply chisel away the names of old kings and carve the name of Ramses in their place. And Ramses learned a trick. He ordered his name to be carved so deeply into the stone, sometimes inches deep, that no future enemy could ever scrape it off without destroying the wall entirely.
But a young, ambitious pharaoh needs a war to prove himself. Egypt was suffocating within its borders, and to the north, in Syria, the Hittite Empire was flexing its muscles. Ramses decided it was time to remind the world who owned the Middle East. In the year 1274 BC, he gathered a massive army, 20,000 men, divided into 4 corps named after the gods, Amun, Ra, Ptah, and Seth. He marched north to capture the strategic city of Kadesh. This event became the first battle in human history that we can reconstruct in absolute detail, down to the tactics of individual units. Ramses was young and arrogant. His scouts captured 2 local nomads,
who told him the Hittite army was far away, trembling in fear. Ramses believed what he wanted to hear. He rushed ahead with just one division, the Amun Corps, leaving the rest of his army miles behind. It was a trap. Hidden behind the mound of the city of Kadesh, the Hittite king Muwatalli was waiting with 2,500 war chariots. As Ramses set up camp, the Hittites launched a surprise attack. They crossed the river and smashed into the Egyptian lines like a hammer. The Egyptian division of Ra was annihilated while still marching. Ramses was cut off, surrounded, and staring death in the face.
We know the chaos of this moment intimately, because Ramses wrote about it on every temple he built. We even know the names of the horses pulling his chariot, Theban Victory and Mut is Content. We know the name of his charioteer, Mena, who stood beside the king as the enemy closed in. Ramses should have died that day. He was saved by two things. First, the Hittite troops, seeing the luxury of the pharaoh's camp, stopped to loot. They were grabbing gold goblets and expensive rugs instead of finishing off the king. Second, sheer luck. A unit of Egyptian elite reinforcements arrived from the coast just in time to break the encirclement.
The battle raged for 2 days. It ended in a bloody stalemate. Ramses failed to take Kadesh. The borders did not move a single inch. But when Ramses returned home, he spun the narrative. He didn't report a draw. He reported the greatest victory in the history of the world. On the walls of the Ramesseum, Abu Simbel, and Karnak, he depicted himself as a giant, a god of war, single-handedly crushing thousands of Hittites while his cowardly soldiers watched. He turned a tactical failure into a mythological triumph that would brainwash his people for generations.
The conflict with the Hittites dragged on for years, settling into a Cold War of the Bronze Age. But the world was changing. A new threat was rising in the east, the Assyrians. Assyria was becoming an aggressive, militaristic machine, threatening both Egypt and the Hittites. Realizing they had a common enemy, Ramses and the new Hittite king Hattusili III did something revolutionary. They signed the first recorded peace treaty in human history. But the dry text of the treaty is not the most interesting part. We have found the personal diplomatic letters sent between these two emperors, and they are surprisingly human. These two superpowers didn't just stop fighting, they became frenemies. They sent each other gifts and asked about each other's health. The Hittites, who had access to iron technology, sent weapons. Ramses sent gold.
There is a fascinating letter where the Hittite king, who was getting old, asks Ramses for a favor. He asks for medicine to make him young again. Ramses, likely smiling, replies with a package of creams made of honey and animal fat. He essentially sends him a supply of ancient anti-wrinkle cream. In another exchange, Ramses sends the Hittite king a pair of custom-made Egyptian sandals because the king admired the craftsmanship. It was a golden age of diplomacy where world leaders swapped fashion tips and medical advice. To manage this empire, to oversee his wars and his massive ego, Ramses did something bold. He abandoned the traditional religious capital of Thebes in the south. He moved north to the delta and built a brand new capital city from scratch, Pi Ramesses, or the House of Ramesses. This was not a city of quiet priests. It was the Detroit of the Bronze Age. It was a military-industrial complex built on the ruins of the old Hyksos capital. It was a city of factories. Archaeological evidence shows massive bronze foundries, workshops for repairing thousands of chariots, and stables for the cavalry. It was a loud, smoky, international metropolis. It was so diverse that one district had a temple dedicated to a foreign Semitic god, likely Baal, but marked with the Egyptian hieroglyph for foreign ruler. This city, Pi Ramesses, holds a special place in history for another reason. It is almost certainly the city mentioned in the Bible. In the book of Exodus, it is written that the Israelites were forced to build treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. The timing, the location, and the massive use of Semitic labor all point to this specific moment in history. But glory has a price. Ramses lived so long that he became a problem for his own country. He had over 150 children. He outlived his first 12 heirs. By the time he died in his 90s, he wasn't just a king, he was a living fossil. His sons, waiting decades for the throne, had taken up positions as governors, generals, and high officials. They entrenched themselves in the provinces, creating many dynasties that weakened the central authority. Meanwhile, in the south, the high priests of Amun had used the decades of peace and the flow of gold to buy up land. By the end of Ramses' reign, the Temple of Amun owned an estimated 90.
Ramses left behind a country that looked invincible, covered in gold, colossal statues, and inscriptions of his victories. But beneath the surface, the machine was breaking. The priests were too rich, the local governors were too independent, and the world outside was beginning to crack. Ramses the Great was the last golden sunset of the Bronze Age, because just over the horizon, a storm was gathering that would sweep away not just dynasties, but entire civilizations.